I think I want to build a Sagitaur. Or maybe it's a Sagitaur. Or is it Sagitaur? I don't know. However the heck you say it. I'm going to build one of these. Now I think this is one of those hidden gem type of kits because it has so many little details to paint. The weapons options and the stowage and tires and suspension and all of those things, just a lot packed into a very small space. But one of the things that really caught my eye was the interior. It has a full interior with multiple options for the figure's heads. And while part of the figure is molded in, the parts are cast in such a way that it's actually going to be really easy to paint. So I want to take this video and examine some ways of painting interiors. Now, we're going to be looking at this model in particular, but this would work with the Land Fortress. This would really work with any interior on any Warhammer vehicle because the basic principles are going to be the same. I went ahead and built the figure so that the handles, the steering handles, were already in place. I made sure that they fit by test fitting him into this part here. I've got Weird Harold built up, the Ironkin, and yeah, that's what I'm going to call in the rest of the video, Weird Harold. And I've got the control consoles separately. I went ahead and primed a little bit of the inside there because some of that will be seen once this is in there. So I wanted that to be primed, and I'll do some painting there. But everything on the interior is primed up and ready for paint. I want to talk briefly about how I approach painting an interior, and I do that by evaluating how does the canopy look? Is there a lot of framing? Is it a very clear canopy? Can it open? Can it be glued open? Can it be pulled open? Whatever. In this case, the clear parts are not really clear. They're not bad, and you could probably polish them up to a better shine than they are, but they're a little bit thick, and so you're not going to be seeing all of the details as you would if this were, say, an aircraft kit with a very thin, very crystal clear canopy that made it a lot easier to see the interior. But you're still going to see quite a bit of it. It's going to show through. So in picking the colors, if I'm not doing a historical subject where that's kind of dictated by what the real thing was, what I do in evaluating the colors for something like this is I think in terms of contrast. So if, for instance, if the figure is going to be in a very dark uniform, then I usually go for a lighter interior color, so there's going to be some contrast there. In this case, the figure is going to be in green and white. I'm going to do these colors here. It's going to be green and white, and that white is going to be very prominent. So I want to have more of a contrast, so I'm going to paint the interior more of a black, dark gray. I'm going to use darker colors. That will also help all of the little dials and knobs and things like that, which are going to be reds and blues and yellows and greens and purples and whatever else I can throw in there. That's going to help those stand out. So when you're planning your colors, I always recommend thinking in terms of contrast, that when somebody's looking down in it, what are they going to see? I'm going to start off giving everything an overcoat of Death Reaper from 2 thin coats. This may seem a little odd because I've already primed it in black, but one, this is not pure black. This is kind of a very dark gray. Maybe it would be the equivalent of Citadel's Corvus black or Vallejo black gray. I'm also doing this so that if I missed anything during the priming, this will get it covered. It'll also give me the ability to have some darker shadows rather than just everything being pure black. So I'm going to be bringing up some of these colors a bit. So everything gets a coat of this. Now I'm going to use Dungeon Stone Gray, and this is sort of like Mechanicus Standard Gray. It's a neutralish gray. And I'm going to paint all of the areas that are raised up a little bit. And what this is going to do is just visually lift them up from the background, providing just a little more contrast and just making those details stand out a little bit. I'll do most of this on this lower part of the cockpit tub and on that back where the seat rest is and all of those dials and boxes and switches. Now, any place there's cables, I'm going to go back and paint over that in Doom Death Black, which is a pure black. I'm not only going to get the tops of the cables, but I want to make sure to get just down the side, not all the way down to where it meets the surface, but down most of the side, so that will create some deep shadow for some later painting. Now I'm going to use Ivory Tusk to paint in all the buttons and knobs and switches and things like that. This is going to be more of an undercoat than a final color. Now with those very first base colors on, I'm going to go in and apply a heavy wash of Nuln Oil. I'm just going to cover everything. I'll base the seat padding in Royal Cloak. I'll do some highlighting in the center pads here with some Sword Hilt Burgundy. To help the edges stand out on the black areas, I'm going to use some Wizard Gray and start putting in a kind of a thicker highlight, maybe what you call a chunky highlight, to get started on that. I'm going to do this on all the little raised, or the little edges and like around these vents and all of that stuff to help the detail stand out. I could dry brush this, but I want a harder edge so that when somebody looks through into the cockpit, they'll see very definite outlines rather than the softer appearance that a dry brush would use or would give. I'm going to do my best to do a very fine edge highlight with Carcharodon Gray. I'm not going to do this on all the edges, but the more upturned ones in the corners and things like that. Now I use some glistening gums to do an edge highlight right along these leather areas. Now there's various buttons and dials and switches and things like that. For the buttons and the switches, I'm going to leave some of them in that ivory color, but I'm going to base some of them in Berserker Red, which is a darker red. And to give emphasis to some of the buttons, I'm going to paint them with Demon Red. This is to make them look maybe kind of like they're glowing. I'm going to base these pipes in Marine Blue. Now highlight the pipework with Celestial Blue. I use some Trooper White to kind of just put in a little bit of a line around the edges and the bottom of the multifunction displays. And then I just put in a drop in each of the gauges just to brighten those up a bit. Now what I'm going to do is take some Ethermatic Blue, a Citadel contrast paint. I'm just going to real quickly glaze that over each of the displays. And once that's dry, I'm going to glaze on a second coat, only about 2/3 of the way towards the top. And I'm going to hold it upside down so that I can get gravity to help me out just a little bit on this. Now I use the same color one more time, but only about 1/3 of the way up towards the top. Now I'll put some Croxagore scales right at the top. I'm going to start painting the armor on the figure in Ivory Tusk, because there's going to be a lot of stuff painted after this. I'm not worried about being neat here. I can tidy it up later. I'm also going to paint Weird Harold's armor this way too. Now I'll shade down the armor with Citadel contrast paint, Briar Queen Chill. I'll put this on here fairly heavily and then wipe my brush off and wipe away the excess. Now I'll start painting in the uniform with Sons of Horus green. I'll also be sure and get his legs down there in the cockpit tub.
I'm going to base these leather belts in cuirass leather. Now I'll add the first highlight with boar hide. Now I added in a little bit of texture with that boar hide. Now I'm going to go back in with fur cloak and do a final, hopefully sharper edge highlight. I'll paint the harness for the seat belts with Surcoat silver, and any other silver details in the interior I'll use the same color. Like there's going to be some on the handles here, and Weird Harold's arms, stuff like that. I'll base paint Weird Harold's head in Canoptic alloy. I'll go over the metal parts with Oblivion black wash. I'm highlighting the black parts of the uniform with Cold Corpse Gray. Now I'll add a bright highlight of Wolf Gray. And drop some Bad Moon Yellow right here on this light. I'm going to base the whole head in several layers of Barbarian Brawn. I'm going to base his helmet in Scorched Earth. I'm going to highlight this with Ancient Forest. Now I'll do a final highlight of Wasteland Brown.
I didn't bother trying to talk and film at the same time when it came to the face. When it comes to painting detail that close up, I have a difficult time, and I have a particularly difficult time with faces. I'm not sure why. There's other things that I paint that are small, that have blends and things like that, that I don't seem to have as much trouble with. But I keep working at it, keep trying. I have seen some improvement in the work that I do on faces. I think this one is, while this one is not stellar, I think it's the best that I've done so far. And I actually went back after taking these shots. I actually went back and made some corrections to some of that shading. I realize now that I probably should have just left the shade off, but at a foot away, it doesn't look too bad. So I'm happy with that. Yeah, from a distance, I'm okay with the face. I'm happy with that. That's probably better than what I've ever done in the past. I'm not going to say best ever, because it would have to be really good to qualify as best ever, at least for me. But I'm happier with it than I've ever been with any other face. And if you watch my videos, you know I'm not happy with the faces I paint. So I'm good with that. I'm viewing it from a little over a foot away. The camera's kind of zoomed in, so being a foot away and with my poor eyesight, it works out. But nevertheless, I started to say this is a fun kit. It's a sub-kit, I guess you would say, within a kit. But it's been a lot of fun to paint. There's just so many little details that this is one of those cases of hey, this is why I model. To get in the little details like this. Sure, most of that won't be seen. Very little of it will. Once it's assembled and under the canopy, it'll be slightly distorted. It'll be in shadow. Mainly what you'll see is the guy's white armor, the belts, and the green glow of his goggles. Maybe the top of Weird Harold's head. But this is why I do it, because stuff like this is fun, even if nobody's going to see it. Well, thanks so much for watching this video, especially if you're still hanging around at this point. I hope this has been encouraging and enjoyable to just talk a little bit about painting interiors and what that looks like. I painted many an interior when I did aircraft building, so it's something I really like and I'm really comfortable with, and quite enjoy doing. And I hope you'll take time to paint something like this yourself. I'd also like to say thank you to all the patrons who support the work that I do. You're a blessing to me. You're a blessing to my family. It's your support that allows me to get kits like this, and it just makes that possible. So thank you very much. With all that being said, I'll leave you with one final thought, as I always like to do. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.